trying to give a scope of. So today's a little outside of the box.
I was just getting into the second part, so I'm glad that I didn't miss much, but I'm excited.
Well, the second part of last week was a whole unique thing, actually.
Good. I'll go back and watch it.
Well, it was on Proverbs 8. I started looking at Proverbs 8 probably, 15, 20 years ago. And I was starting to do the translation effort, but I didn't know exactly. I didn't have the same perspective as I have now. So I had been anticipating or anxiously wanting to go redo Proverbs 8 for quite a few years and have never had the time because of doing other things. And so I took the time last week, and that's what that was, the second hour reading that. And I had no idea where it was going. I just knew that there was something in there I wanted to look at regarding covering himself with dust. So that whole rendition that I read was a surprise to me, just kind of extracted from the text as I was looking at it during the week. So
I've pressed record already.
That's okay. Then we can just
start off with prayer. Father, thank you for everybody being here, the opportunity to hear your word again. Keep everybody safe out here in the dispersion. Remember us as we do your things, and focus on your words. In whose name I pray. Amen. 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 And then before we get going, I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. First off, people have mentioned the fact that the channel has commercials on it. What they call that, monetized the channel. So just so people know, as a point of reference, there's a cost to do this. There's a cost to host the website. There's a cost for the software to edit video. There's cost associated. And Eric mostly and I have been out of pocket for this stuff, and YouTube makes this available. You can monetize the channel, and they pay you. I mean, so far since we've started, once you hit 1,000 subscribers, you can monetize the channel. So far, we've made $40 as a channel. So,
woohoo!
Yay! We're not getting rich off of it, but there's a donate button every video, and then there's a donate button on the website, and we don't get hardly any donations. So, in an effort to not be out of pocket anymore, YouTube makes this available. So, we're gonna take advantage of it. So, as much as I don't want to. You could skip the commercials. We don't have control over what they put up. So when you first go to sign up for it, they give you options of what you will and will not allow: gambling, alcohol, things like that. But other than that, yeah, it's there. Skip it if you don't want to see it. But anyway,
one way to look at this, I don't particularly appreciate the commercials either. I don't like them at all. But this is like the information highway is somebody else's infrastructure. And for us to even have, you might call it free access to the internet, I mean, you still got to pay a monthly. I mean, sometimes, what is Comcast or something like $80 a month? I mean, so it costs to be on the internet. But what I'm saying is that somebody else has built the road. Somebody else is making this possible for us to jump on, and it's like, well, gee, that's great. Let's take advantage of it. Hence this platform that's on their highway. And if they say, listen, once you hit 1,000, we're going to start the toll. We're going to start charging you a toll, and the toll is we get to put our advertisements up. But then there's other benefits, which I don't know. I'm completely out of that loop, but I'm just saying, it's like I could say, forget it, no advertisements, in which case, I mean, it says up here, 10 of 71 in the call. So there's 10 people listening, potentially 71 could be on the call. I think they have a limit of 100, but I've never seen more than a dozen or maybe 20. And it's like, we could just say, forget it, and we're not going to do that. But the $40 at least will help pay for Kurt's internet connection for a month, maybe, or something like that. So it's like, well, whatever the other benefits, I think you said that perhaps you can put up another site, another channel.
No, there's a way to, it's right on YouTube. So again, once you hit 1,000, they allow you to, people to join erictology.net YouTube channel, and we can put stuff up that's private video, but I mean, there's a membership fee associated with that.
Which I don't like either, but
Eric and I were talking about recording the after show, which a lot of people have asked. You can't, it'll show that it's there, but you can't watch it unless you're a member. And a lot of stuff is said in the after show. So, I mean, that's the plan starting next week. Eric's gonna, like, even once I click off, you know, he'll hit record, and we'll post it.
The idea is that if you allow them to monetize at 1,000, then they'll give you, hey, you can have another channel where only members can have it. And Margaret was talking about something about that a couple weeks ago. And the idea is that, okay, it's a bit of a veil of protection against random strangers wandering on. Anybody can still wander on, but because some people want the after show recorded and some people don't because it's anonymous, then it's like, well, what do you do? You know, what do you play into? And there's always that talk of they're going to shut down the internet, and it's like, well, do we take advantage of it while we have it? Whatever. If people have any particular interest or want to have your voice thrown into the consideration here, feel free to contact Kurt, or I'm a little bit harder to reach, but you could certainly contact Kurt and let him know if it's yay or nay. It is just consideration, but anyway, apology for the fact that there's random commercials that YouTube puts up, but nobody's trying to do any funny business. That's just what it is. That's the
last thing that is in the plans is also to have people ask for a store, and we're figuring out how to do that. And that'll be in the scroll at the bottom of each video. I want to buy a coffee mug with the Starburst or the mouse pad or whatever. But we got to figure out how to do it. We don't know how to do it yet. So Margaret's going to show us.
Anyway, it's pretty much whatever people want to have available. It's not that we're trying to push an agenda of commerce. I was accused of that once a long time ago with a voice of disdain. Commercializing the word, huh? And it's like, I have never charged a nickel for anything I've done for 20 years now, just so people know. And the radio station was selling the chart at one point, but that was to fund the radio station, Hebrew Nation Radio. And nobody's making anything. It's just, it costs to print. Cost per square foot for every item printed.
What is the web hosting fee for the for your website?
Oh, I think it's like $300 or something from GoDaddy. Besides all this work that James Ralph does, that I've tried to give him a little bit, but nobody's paying him. That's all volunteer. Your work is all volunteer. So just so people know there's an infrastructure that it takes to make things available as free as possible. So please don't be affected or disturbed at the commercials. If you can, don't absorb offense and hold an attitude.
And occasionally a commercial will show up that you can't skip. I have no control over that. YouTube decides what they decide. So
I just want to chime in right here. This is Margaret. I handle websites for companies. And I know everybody wants them free, but folks, somebody has to pay for the technology, and there's absolutely no way around it. And if having your own website where you're putting up Eric's tapes is protecting all of us from those videos being destroyed and taken away should anything go down or a blip or whatever, at least they're still out there on your website if the host companies can get to them. Okay, so there is that problem. But I'm sure Eric's saving these videos. But there's a cost. And if we want to support Eric, we want to be taught by Eric, we want to hear what he has to say, then we'll need to help pay the cost. It's just as simple as that. There's just no way around it. So I'm happy to hear that you have the donate button. And I think we should all take advantage of that, because we're a community of people, are we not? And we have to support that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'll be quiet now. Love you guys.
Outstanding. All right, here we go. this week's teaching. I'm going to shut off the cameras and microphones, and it's all you, Eric. See you in an hour.
Okay. This week, the concept is voices. Voices. Now, I'm still kind of staging this with the background and the attire as being part of the Miscon pattern. So if you reference the chart with the vertical stripes on it, there's the, let me explain. I talked about this a little bit last week about the blue, purple, red, white. And as a matter of fact, there's a couple verses, one in Numbers and one in Deuteronomy, about making zitziot, and you can make them any way you want. This, it says have a blue thread, but it doesn't say you couldn't have other colors. Generally, the Jews make them white, not necessarily with blue, usually not with blue, because, well, they can't find the sea creature that the blue was determined or made with. And from what I understand, if the sea creature, whether it was a snail or whether it was, maybe it was a shellfish. Anyway, the point, if you harvested or processed it in the daylight versus at the night, you'd have different colors. And whether the colors were more of a turquoise blue or more of a dark blue depended on when you processed it. So for somebody to say, oh, this is the color of Tehillit blue, well, from what I understand, that's not exactly true. There is no specific color. You could say, well, the blue on the Israeli flag is the generally accepted color, but I can't say whether that's a matter of fact. But the idea that there's a lot of different ways to do zitziot. This has got a few knots, and then blue, purple, red, white, and then some more knots, and then gold, and then the other colors of blue, purple, red, white, and you can see that, well, the blue is hardly any at all. The number of wraps around I do according to letters. So blue, purple, red, white is, I think I did 10, 5, 6, 5, which is Yod He Vav He, and here the blue, purple, red, white is 1, 5, 10, 5, which would be Aleph He Yod He. So one wrap around, and then you change the color for wrapping around. This is just my own design, my own voice. And then then I think I did 50 knots here, and then a little bit of a tassel. Hey, but this thing is a bit long, and sometimes people say, oh, lengthen their ziti, they're thinking they're proud, and it's like, it's just what it takes to do the idea in your mind. And there's not 7 strands, it's just blue, purple, red, white, gold in this one. I made one with 22. So there was each one was a letter of the alphabet, and that thing was like 3 feet long. It's just whatever you are expressing. So the idea of this week's talk is on the chart, there's the first 7 letters, and the Zion, actually the Vav Zion, is this kind of this black, and I have a bit of column because there's about 10 variations of the Miscon pattern there. And it starts off with the Exodus 25, the Miscon, the Moedim, the Beatitudes. 10 places, 10 voices where I believe the Miscon pattern itself was clearly or most easily seen, in my estimation. So there's this black column, and then there was blue, then purple, then red, then white. And so the blue was lined up with Het Tet Yod, the purple with Kaf Lamed, the red with Mem Nun, and then 3 together, Samek Ayin Pei, and the white. Well, then Zodi lines up with the gold. Well, if Zodi lines up with the Ark of the Covenant, and that's the gold, the next letter would be Kuf, but what's Kuf? And there's a black column there. And so in pondering the Miscon pattern back in 2004, and looking, I found at least 500 places, and I've found more since then, places where this pattern shows up in Scripture, according to my subjective analysis, interpretation. And the pattern itself, starting with Het, ending with Zodi. So you got the big white fence, Het Tet Yod, lining up with Pesach. You've got Kaf Lamed lining up with the barbecue grill, the bronze altar, with Chag HaMatzot, unleavened bread. Then you've got Memnoon lining up with Shavuot, the 50 days of counting. And then you've got the covered place. Well, in the covered place, you've got the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. Well, those are three separate ones, but they all work together. That's why they're all in the white. And that's Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And then set apart by itself, Shemini Atzeret. Well, this is a little different pattern configuration than, there's a lady, I couldn't remember the name the other day, it was Alyssa Alwine. She did a presentation of the menorah, basically like the Moedim, but she has Shavuot being two festivals separated by 50 days. Well, then there's no Shemini Atzeret. And most people I've seen printed out, most people say that. Not everybody. Todd Bennett, I believe, would, in his book, Walk in the Light, actually it was going to be one book and he made it about 20 something books. I'm not sure where he's at now with it, but he was of the same determination that Shavuot was two festivals. Just so you know, this isn't the only voice saying this, but why? And what's the ramifications or the significance or the effect of determining that Shavuot is two festivals versus Shavuot being one festival? Well, the menorah has 7 branches. If it's a Hanukkah, which is the menorah for Hanukkah, they've got 8 branches. That's a different matter. But if you have the 7-branch menorah, like it says in Exodus, that was used in the Mishkan, well, if there's 7 Moedim, what are they? Well, if you look at Leviticus 23, what I saw is that each one of the Moed start with, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, okay, so for Pesach, and then Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying for unleavened bread, and then, but for Shavuot, he says that at the beginning, but then he explains the 50 days of counting, and then the 50th day, what they call Bikurim or wave loaf. So you've got the wave sheaf, which would be the heads of grain that you raise on day 1, and then 50 days later, you wave up 2 loaves. And then he says, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, well, that's for Yom Teruah, which is in the autumn. So I looked at that and thought, wait a second, Shavuot is a 50-day festival, counting 50 days, not 2 festivals. And if it's 1, then when you get to Sukkot, that's only the 6th festival. So that means Shemini Atzeret is its own regard. Well, so is the festival of unleavened bread. Why do they call that Pesach? Pesach is only the meal eaten on the evening of the 14th. But why do they call this the week of Passover, Pesach? Or do they say it's the whole occasion, the whole festival of eating unleavened bread, in which case if you eat unleavened bread at the Pesach meal, is that part of unleavened bread? See, there's this confusion. And what I determined for various parts of the consideration to not go into right now, but just for the sake of moving along, if the Passover meal is the evening of the 14th, you got to get ready for it towards the afternoon. So that's 1 day, the 14th, and then 7 days of unleavened bread. And if you go around to the other end, the tail end of the festivals, you've got 7 days of Sukkot, and then the last day, 1 day of Shemini Atzeret. So they're like bookends. 1 and then 7, 7 and then 1. Well, that's fitting. Is it true? It seems to me to be true, but it's fitting. It's just a model of graphic pattern. 1 and then 7, 7 and 1. But a lot of people will say, no way. You got 2 festivals. And by doing that, for example, if you were to say, the first day of waving the sheaf is the 3rd festival, then the 4th festival is the 50th day, where you wave the, called Pentecost. Penta is Greek for 50, cost, like what's it cost, you're counting out. So literally Pentecost means, in English, from the Greek, count 50. Well, if that's the 4th festival, and if I'm saying, no, Yom Teruah is the 4th festival, well, now you have a thematic discrepancy. It's like, Is the fourth festival correlated to the fourth day, the day that the sun, moon, and stars were lit up in the sky? Is that an equivalency? And if I say Mem Noon are together as one festival, it's like Mem is a water, is a womb, is a pond, and the fish jumps out, the baby is born. So Mem Noon are the concept of a pregnancy, a developed seed. What seed? Kaf Lamed. Kaf is an open hand, but like lines of instruction, lay it down flat. And it's like when Adam and Adam and Eve, were in the garden and they were ejected, it said they went and were kicked out and went back to the land from whence they were taken from the soil, and they were told to till the soil to eat. Instead of eating the fruit from the garden, they now had to take a hoe, like a lamed shape, scratch the ground, plant seeds, and eat from there. So if I line up Kaf and Lamed with the barbecue grill, so the grill looks like these lines, this grate, a filter. A heart is a pump, a filter, that would be this kind of this lamed, this teaching and instruction, and Kaf being a filter or a grate or a screen is also the first word of the word for kidney. Lamed, bet, love is the word for heart. So you've got this idea of a mechanical device where you're filtering water or oil or hydraulic fluid or something like that. I'm just saying that as you're pondering these matters, all these other pictures come into play. And what pictures come to my mind might be different than what comes to somebody else's mind. But nevertheless, this becomes a personal study. So the voices I hear in my head or my heart might be different than the voices you would hear. The voices of the letters, the voices of the objects in the Mishkan. Well, if you look on the chart, the idea that blue, purple, red, white lines up with Yod, He, Vav, He. So I was trying to explain that the first hour last week, which is, the different colors of shirt, black, then blue, purple, red, white, then gold, then, hey, black again. Why? Because at the very beginning, we were talking about Galatians chapter 3 in particular, but the whole book of Galatians, and it's like, I hear a voice in the book of Galatians. Hey, that's Paul's voice. Whoa, wait a minute. No, Paul was speaking Greek or maybe Aramaic. He wasn't speaking English. If I'm reading in English the book of Galatians today, I'm not hearing Paul's voice. I'm hearing somebody tell me what they think Paul said. And maybe they meant well, maybe they were wrong, maybe they were right, maybe they were divine inspiration, and maybe they weren't. Maybe it was a conspiracy of mess and stuff. I don't know. So when I said, look, it's not about Paul, it's about me, it's what I hear, it's what I'm taking to heart. It's what I meant. That I can't account for what somebody else says, what somebody else thinks, what somebody else does, how they keep Shabbat, how they keep the Moedim, whether they count Shavuot as two festivals or one. I have to make it my own. And so when I made the comment, it doesn't matter what Paul said. It doesn't matter if it was Paul that said it. What I meant was I'm responsible for myself. And, Mark was saying it does matter what Paul said. Other people have different opinions. That's fine. It's a matter of discussion, a matter of consideration, contemplation. But the idea that in the darkness, hence the dark column, Vav Zion, Yeshua was put to the weapon, crucified outside the fence. And then the fence with the 4-color embroidery. Why those 4 colors? So in my own pondering, I thought, well, there's 4 colors, blue, purple, red, white. There's 4 letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. So what if I look at those 4 colors and to me, the voice is, hey, that's Yod, He, Vav, He. So I took 4 colors of rope, 3/8 diameter colored rope that you can get at the hardware store, and I tied a giant tzitzit. It's about 6 feet long, about that big around, and, wore it as a belt on one of the weeks of the letters in 2011 in the Arictology class. I can't remember which week it was. But my point is, make it your own art, make it your own poetry, make it what voice you hear, turn it into your voice of expression, which is what Paul was doing. And whether he was accurately rendered in English or various other translations or not, I can't account for. Nor is he responsible for it. He was responsible for trying to encourage people to regard these matters and to express his confident hope in Yahweh, Zavot, the Elohim of Israel. And that's the best any of us can do. All we can do is say, hey, this stuff is gold. And it's up to everybody else to make it their own. So if I'm looking at the big white fence, or if the fence was 3 colors like Andrew Hoy says, round and not square or rectangular, whatever, consider it. But to me, when I say the big white fence, I'm thinking Het Yod, Passover, choose life, the kingdom of Yod He Vav He. Well, that's a choice that one makes outside, not having come in yet. So for the SDAs or somebody say, if you don't keep the Sabbath day, you can't even enter the kingdom. That doesn't fit the model, because you can't learn about the Sabbath day till you come in at the barbecue grill. That's the lines of instruction. But you're already in the fence. So a Christian who acknowledges Yahusha being crucified outside the fence, I'm just reading the model, the pattern now, in my regard. Outside in the land of death and darkness, the Vav Zion, the man slain, we're all being subject to the curse unto death and overwhelmed by our enemies. You look at Yeshua, you hear his voice offering eternal life, offering salvation, offering forgiveness, offering reconciliation with the Elohim, the creator of the universe that we have offended, that we have betrayed, that we have forsaken, that we have been lied to and don't even know who he is. But if we respond, yes, I choose life. That's the only matter outside. And then for the apostles in the book of Acts, including Paul, to say, hey, let's make up 4 new laws, having nothing to do with the 10 Commandments or the Noahide laws. Let's make up 4 laws. Don't eat something that's been strangled. Don't drink the blood. Don't eat something offered to demons, idols, foreign gods, Elohim Akrim. And don't engage with whores, prostitutes, harlotry. Why? Why those 4? In my estimation, each one of them taints or discombobulates your being as a person who can think. If you strangle an animal, the chemicals in the blood you'll take that on. Whatever scientists, biologists can tell you what that is. If there are demons and you eat something offered to the demons, are you importing demonic influence? If you fornicate with somebody and you're becoming one flesh with them and they're somebody who has no regard of Yahuwah, are you now diminishing or your thoughts and heart and effort to seek Elohim, or are you distracting yours? Are you taking on their voice, arguing with you as you try to contemplate Yahweh's stuff? If you drink the blood and the life is in the blood, are you taking on a bestial, animalistic nephesh, and yet you're trying to be a human? See, the cultures that say that do drink animal blood is because if you're going to be a powerful warrior and you're just only a human, well, drink jaguar blood, yeah, fiercer. And it's like, well, is that better? Well, in some sense, they might think, yeah, jaguars are fierce, so you're better. But if humanity, if humans, if Adam is the pinnacle of creation, if it's the best thing, better than a jaguar, to be a human, well, then to drink jaguar blood is a diminishment. But they don't see it that way. But if you drink animal blood, that's what you're doing. You're pulling yourself down, or you're burying your human potential with something less. So I can look at what the apostles were saying and say, they're not replacing the 10 Commandments. They're not giving us 4 new laws to replace anything Yahweh said. They're saying, we have determined with human reasoning that if you do these 4 things in particular, you will incapacitate yourself, diminish your own ability to even hear the voice of Yahuwah. or to hear it clearly, or to hear it and then conduct your personal being at its optimal potential. So don't do those four things. Because, and it goes on to say, because Moshe is preached or taught weekly, every Shabbat in the synagogue. Stay away from those four things, come to the synagogue, and now. So in other words, again, I'm regarding the pattern. If you're outside and you choose life, and it's like, now what? Step into the place of learning, teaching, and learn the Torah, the ways of Yahuwah, the protocols of the kingdom, the customs of the civilization within the fence. That's Kaf Lamed. Lamed literally means teach and learn. Talmud, the teaching. Talmudim are the taught ones. Discipline, disciple. The disciples are the Talmudim taught ones. All the same word, the same concept. And as you're learning the teachings, then the seed that Yeshua said was the word of Elohim gets planted in your heart. Mem nun. And then you nurture the teaching with your attitude, making it your own. You become the nun. There's a spiritual, eternal you, the nun, birthed within your corporal, material flesh, mem. And that nun, that thing that comes alive, Adam of a different sort than the first Adam, birthed of this other Adam. It's like, what? If I'm saying all this for a reason, I'm telling you the staging of the Miscon pattern, but I'm saying if this is true, then as you contemplate this, associated with the letters, associated with the Moedim, associated with the days of creation, then what you're doing is, as you read scripture and as you look at the Hebrew and see each one of these letters used to spell a word, or developing a concept, like what David wrote in the Psalms, which we're going to look at here, all of a sudden you're seeing things differently. So the idea that going back a few weeks, why did he have to die? Forget the Christian doctrine. It had to do with the message that's in these 22 letters. Building a consciousness. If you regard these 22 letters as factors of reality, you're going to have a different way of looking at your life, yourself, your being, and this world that we're staged theatrically for the moment with. You're going to see it differently than anybody else. And you'll have a hard time finding compatibility with most other people based on how you see it. And if you're seeing it based on the staging of the 22 letters, well, what do the 22 letters mean? And if you learn Aleph is an ox, Bet is a house, Gimel is a camel, ox, house, camel, door, window, nail, weapon. Well, you can figure out and tell a story, but are those random objects? How are they tied together? Is there a flow between them? Hence the discussion of meta, or the connecting between them, and Yahweh Echad. And so all these talks are basically giving the individual that wants to learn the language perspective and stuff you might say to chew on, to like chewing the cud. You take it in. That's what certain animals, the cows and goats and sheep, they eat, they graze, they lamed, they learn the instructions, and then they ponder, they meditate, they regurgitate. And what was that? How does that work? You just keep chewing it. And so even within what we're allowed to eat and not eat, if it has a cloven hoof and chews the cud, you can eat it. But if they don't have cloven hooves, or if they don't chew the cud, then don't eat it. Why? Well, that's just the way it worked. No, there's a picture, there's a metaphor within what is kosher food. And is it accurate? Is that just somebody's analysis, somebody else's voice? Well, it seems to play out, because if we have the animals with a cloven hoof, for example, heavy equipment operators have this thing, I believe it's called the sheep's foot. It's this big tumbling or like a big barrel filled with water, so it's very heavy, pulled behind a bulldozer, and it's got, I think, the like sheep's feet sticking out about 6 inches with these cloven feet. And when they're doing excavation road work, grading on property, earth, they pull this thing and those sheep's feet push in, compacting. You can compact by pounding, you can compact by rolling, but something about these sheep's feet really, for processing the earth. What I'm saying is that they have found that animals and things are built into the universe which are pictures of what our behavior of study is. Doesn't mean it's dogmatically, this is a truth, but it's like very interesting, a truth of sorts that we can benefit if we ponder it. So if then this is an accurate model of this Miscon pattern, we're out in the darkness being lied to, surrounded by death, subject to overwhelming enemies with big weapons, Havav Zion. So when Pilate said, behold this man, Hey Aleph means behold here. So Hey is to point at what? The word Zion Hey means this. The word Zion Aleph Tav means this. Hey Aleph means this. This what? Vav is the masculine suffix of a word, but it's also this specific, and I hold it like this because that's the paleo letter Vav, can be a nail, it can be a goblet, that you drink, it's the number 6. Nobody ever says 6 is the number of man. It's mentioned something about that in Revelation with 666, but the point is it's the masculine suffix. But if you say, well, this is this masculine job description of being the connector, the nail, the hook, the priest is supposed to, as we mentioned, Kohanim and Melachim last week, to connect the matters of heaven to the matters of humans on earth, that the priest's job is supposed to make the distinction between the kadosh and the halal, the sacred and the profane, the holy and the common. The priest's job is to let people understand the distinction. Well, the distinction is that letter Zion, which is to cut off, to separate, to break apart and say there's this and there's that. So Zion is not just a weapon, Zion is also a crown. The king, oh, he's the guy wearing the crown. Or, hey, it's the 7th day of the week, that one of distinction. Or the officer, he's the guy with the funny hat or wearing the star on his chest. So anything that's a distinction is a Zion, hence this. So Havav Zion, behold this man, Pilate said of Yeshua after he'd whipped him, ripped his flesh, stuck a crown of thorns on him, put the robe of state. It's such mockery, but that means Havav Zion is a prophecy that Pilate pointed at, fulfilling the 3 voices of Havav Zion. A prophecy of who? And if you know the letters, Bet Gimel Dalet. Who's Bet Gimel Dalet? The one coming from Aleph. So if Aleph is the first letter that means I am, I will, what? Bet Gimel Dalet, put into object form, traveling to Dalet? Dalet being the door of what? Dalet Hey is the feminine suffix, birthed through a woman to be the man who's put on display, but yet Bet Gimel Dalet is a word that means deceive, betray, cloak, camouflage, to come in disguise. So when Yeshua said, hey, who do people think I am? And the disciples say, some people think you're Elijah, some people think you're really John the Baptist, and they thought they killed him, but there was some mistake. And he says, well, who do you say I am? And Peter says, thou art the Christ, the Son of God. Speaking King James English, and he says, you couldn't figure that out. Flesh and blood couldn't have determined this because I have a great disguise. It must have been the Ruach. He must have tipped you off and told you that I'm that guy. Who are you? I'm that guy that the Aleph who Bet Gimel Dalet did as the Havav Zion, that then had to be put to death and put into the Het Tet Yod as Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun. And Yeshua gave another graphic example of a truth. He said, if a kernel of wheat stays by itself with integrity, oh, I'm just a kernel of wheat. Okay, the DNA of a kernel of wheat. There's nothing wrong with that. It's got integrity of itself. But if it dies, and he built this system, if it dies, What happens? What scientifically happens to a kernel of wheat if it dies? It's dead. He invented death. He invented life. He invented an object with neither life nor death. It's just an object. A rock is just an object. Is a kernel of wheat a living thing? No. It's got potential of life. It's also, but when you bury it in the ground, it has to die. So what does that mean? And if it's put into the ground and dies, I mean, they can find kernels of wheat in the pyramids thousands of years old. They still have this potential of life. And if they put it in the earth with a certain warmth, with sunlight, with water, it comes alive. Even after thousands of years, it comes alive. He built that whole system to work. So for him to say, I'm going to do the same thing, because it's a fractal pattern. So he's going to be placed into the earth in this sepulcher, dead, die, but that kernel of wheat will sprout back out, regain life. There's Memnoon, Somic, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And so the graphic visualization of multiplicity, you've got the stalk of the menorah, and then the branches of the menorah. And then the menorah is a model of something that bears fruit or bears light or produces more than itself. And then the ion is a picture of the fruit. Somic ion is the word to diversify or to branch out. Ion pay is the word for bird or to fly or spread a wing. And it's like, whoa, this thing's taking off. So he built into the model of the alphabet what happens. Why did he come here to die? And you can read the letters. And then pay, poof, pay Zodi, explode, resurrect, burst out of the grave. Zodi is a picture of a straight line with this, like the number 2 in paleo, vertical with this sprout. So it's Aaron's rod that budded. It's a idea of a butterfly sprouting a wing from being a caterpillar to putting out a wing, a bird spreading its wing to fly. And then, okay, if it spreads its wings, where does it go? Koof, up. So Koof is a picture like a circle with a line, like a balloon rising up. Yeshua, after he resurrected from the grave, he hung around for 40 days, and then he ascended vertical into the heavens. That's like the round part and the vertical part, our letter Q in English. And when the disciples saw him, the angel said, he's coming back the same way to the same place. So he's gathering his hosts, his vote from the heavens. Revelation 19. Revelation 19 talks about that. He's gathering his vote. That's the round part. And he's coming back down here to the Mount of Olives. The inverse of the letter Kuf. So this week is basically, well, this is the Kuf view. Because if the golden, the Zodi, the resurrection, the Ark of the Covenant was, we talked about last week with Proverbs 8, this is the sprout of wisdom, the secret place of wisdom, the golden best that Yahuwah made, then this is the Kuf view. So I picture the het like this treasure chest. Picture it instead of the round version, the rectangular version. Well, the domed top over the treasure chest is like this Kuf view, hence the round top of the letter Kuf, or like the helicopter view. You rise up and you get this overview of what's going on. Well, if you rise up like this overview, that's like a cloud over the camp. So you have this vertical aspect, like the exclamation point, and then you've got this questioning, like what's going on? So I draw the motif, and you'll see on the chart the right-hand black column, and now here's this left-hand black column. After the Miscon pattern, the question mark with the exclamation point like the pillar of fire, question mark like billowing clouds. So they were protected by this pillar of fire by night, this pillar of cloud sweeping over the camp by day, protecting them from the sun while they were wandering around in the desert. And then you'll see that I wrote this word on key. What does that mean? Everything on the chart's kind of cryptic. O-N-K-E-Y, on key. Well, if you hear different voices and some of them are discordant, then they're not Yahuwah. Yahuwah said he's Echad, Aleph, Het, Dalet. When the 12 tribes are together. They're Yod Chet Dalet, Yichad. So Yichad and Echad are pretty similar, different context. The Aleph is first person singular prefix. The Yod is a third person, like he will or they will or that which. As an audience talking about somebody else, Yod He Vav He then is a third person reference. People think Yahweh means I am. No, that Ehia means I am or I will. Yahweh is kind of like he will. What? The one who causes things to exist as he intended. That's Yahuwah. So when people say, well, Yeshua, when he was standing at the inquisition of the high priest, and he said, Yahweh, oh, he spoke the ineffable name, I am. He said, I am. So the priest tore his garments. Well, if Yahweh is the ineffable name and he said, I am, that's not what he said. He would have said either Ehyeh, Anoki, or Ani, or Eti, Aleph Tav Yod maybe, but that's more like me. That's not really I am. Aleph He Yod He, Ehyeh, translated I am, Exodus 3. Ani, as in Ani Yahweh, is kind of like this military admiral or emperor, captain of a ship kind of concept. But Anoki, Aleph Nun Kaf Yod, that's the first word used in Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments. Anki Yahweh El Hek, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Anki, hey, that's this word Anki, playing with English with the Hebrew, Hebrew-English blend, Heblish, like kind of a ruachali. Hey, that's that word that Paul Bari used in his post the other day. Ruachali, it's not even in the dictionary, but he's blending ruach, spirit or mind, disposition, and then A-L-L-Y, the English suffix, Heblish. So, Anki, Aleph Nun Kaf Yod. Well, you know that the Sumerians believed the Anoki were those space aliens or Elohim Achrim, other gods that came in on these flying saucer sort of things, and people all over the internet nowadays are talking about the Anoki or the Anoki. It's like, why would Yahweh use the same basic word in Hebrew to refer to himself? Aleph is a prefix, I will. Nun, Kaf is to be like nicked and dented. If you buy an appliance that fell off the truck and is kind of bashed up, they'll give you a discounted price. So Nun, Kaf can mean nicked and dented. Anak, Aleph Nun Kaf can mean I will plummet. A Yod suffix means myself. Plummet, that's like holding a plumb bob. If you're doing construction work, you hold something way up high with a string with a weight, and the weight pulls it to be purely vertical, perfect, perpendicular to the surface of the earth. That's Anoki, I will plummet myself. My plumb bob of determination for perfect verticality. It's also why the letter I, self-referential in English, is written straight with maybe a top and a bottom, but the vertical letter I is in reference to that. Why is it that the word I means myself? Comes from the word Anoki. In Hebrew, though you would never make that association. It's interesting. Also the number one and only, echadness. How do you hear the voices speaking in this Hebrew? So on key, why do I have that written? Because there's a lot of voices. And if he says, you got to be Yahweh Echad. So we talked last week in Proverbs 8, how wisdom is calling out and how some of those verses near the end says Yahweh made it real easy to distinguish. There's his voice, and then there's everything that's variant. Only his voice has to always be the same voice. And I held up my fingers. If you have 4 different voices, it's not Yahweh. If all the 4 voices are echad or singular, that's Yahweh. So if there's the Yod, the hand of the creation, the voice that speaks in nature, the He, the voice of the Torah, the Vav, the Mashiach, Yahusha, and He, the robes of righteousness that we walk in, that we feel led and guided by that same Ruach. So Yod, He, Vav, He, if the second He is the voice of the Torah, the purple, then the 4th letter, the He, the second He, being white linen robes of righteousness, meaning that for us to walk in the ways of Torah is righteousness, and that the true Ruach HaKodesh will lead us according to what he said in the Torah. And if it's a different voice, it ain't him. if it's a different voice than the voice of the Torah, then it's not the Ruach HaKodesh of Yahweh. And if Jesus Christ is translated to mean a different essence than either the Torah or his Father's hand as he built in creation, then he's a fake voice, a lying spirit. See, this is a remarkable, disturbing, but a remarkable realization for me to come to myself. Then I had to sit there and go back and readdress everything I'd been taught as a believer, as a Christian, as a faithful one. Are the four voices echad or are they not? And my point in talking about Paul in Galatians in the black darkness, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. If I do study about Paul, like Mark Gravel was saying, hey, I've studied Paul and I can tell you Paul was Torah observant. Anybody who says otherwise is giving him a bad rap, lying about him. Well, let him speak for himself. Okay, well, then you got to learn Greek or you got to learn Aramaic, and then you got to find an Aramaic Peshitta or some. Andrew Gabriel Roth has wrote the AENT, but it's like, God, man, we're not doing that. We're just reading Galatians in English. Well, then I don't know whose voice that is. And if it matches the voice of the Torah, of Yahusha, of the creator of the heavens and the earth, because Yeshua said, I'm not giving you any other voice. I'm not speaking my own stuff. I'm only saying what I hear my Father saying. I'm only doing what I see my Father doing. I'm echad with my Father. Well, then why did he say, don't worry about what you eat. It's not what goes into your mouth that ruins you. It's go ahead and eat pork. Wrong voice. Peter sees a vision. From heaven, there's a voice. Arise, Peter, kill and eat. Not so, says in English, Lord, not so Adonai, not so. I don't know whose this is. Is this an angel? Is this the Almighty speaking? I've never eaten that stuff, and I never will. What I've cleansed, don't you call unclean. Get up and eat that. And I told you, I had a Greek Orthodox priest say, we are obeying the voice of the divine source speaking to Peter. If he says, get up and eat that pig, yes, sir, we will get up and have pig on our festival days, obeying his voice. Is it the voice of Yahuwah, or is it a lying spirit pretending to be him? I'm not going to accuse anybody else of being wrong or anybody else of being an idiot. I can only attend to myself. I can't tell you why the Almighty, if he did give Peter that vision, why he would do that, knowing that that vision that Peter had 3 times about the sheep coming down with the animals was going to distort the hearts and minds and understanding of the next 2,000 years worth of heartfelt, serious believers. Why would he sabotage his own kingdom like that? He knew what was going to happen. Why is it translated, by saying this, he declared all foods to be clean? That one verse when he said, and what goes into your mouth is what comes out that pollutes you. He knew the trouble it would cause. Why in Deuteronomy 13 does Yahweh Elohim say, I'm going to send, I'm not the devil, not a wayward human, I'm going to send a prophet whose prophecy comes true or a dreamer whose dream comes true, and they're going to lead you astray. Different than what I've said. Why would he do that? Just to see whether we'll stay on the path, just to see whether we as individuals will distinguish the voice of Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel. Yahweh Elohi, my Elohim. Can I hear his voice? Or is it the voice of a liar, a deceiver, Satan, a satanic adversary? He's just doing a job, trying to trick me. Voice in the garden, the Nachash, tree of knowledge of good and evil. Gosh, why did he come in disguise? I got to make sense out of all this. This kuf view, this overview of this whole thing. That's what I'm talking about. So we can look at this Miscon pattern and go, wow, hey, look, blue, purple, red, white. Yahweh, his Torah, my heart about it. Yes, enthusiastically, willingly, volitionally, chafatz, my desire. Give me your seed within me, and I will, 5 minutes, take it to heart, and I will be your person, and I will bear fruit. I will be your menorah, enlightening anybody else. I will put out good fruits of works of righteousness. Galatians 5:22. Love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. I will have mercy so that other people can spread it along. Blessed are the merciful, they will receive mercy. The ion, what goes around comes around. And I will give you from my mouth praise and worship and thanks and confessing my own shortcomings, the pay, the Zodi, and before me the hope of, as you promised, eternal life, not just in the by and by, but the sprouting of the reality of all these matters in the here and now. That golden wisdom of count on my enlightenment to you, my people. Yes, yes, I hear. Count on it, stand on it, invoke it, determined to never let go of this. Okay, so in that lightened place, he then just, like the kuf, the big arm, launches us back to the very Zion position, back into the darkness, and say, now you're back in your circumstance. You know, some friend's child died one day. Somebody else loses their car. Somebody else loses their job. Somebody else, their own brain betrays them with frantic, manic, schizoid thoughts. What? I thought we're supposed to be walking in the light. No, we're told the truth, and then we're launched back into the darkness to be us being the light in that darkness, and say, now what are you going to do with these dark events, these dark circumstances? And like the voice, these voices of the letters, the voice of the Miscon pattern, how do I apply that? So the Kufu throws us back into the Zion situation. Still got a question? Right here, question mark, exclamation point, right here. This stuff, anybody wise, anybody strong, anybody wealthy, nothing compares to this stuff. We read about that. It says that all through the scripture. Don't let the wise man glory in his wisdom, the strong man in his strength, the wealthy man in his wealth. It is to this that Yahuwah looks, the one who will determine for himself the value of these words and invest his life with his energy, with his passion, with his interest, ayin, nun, hey, these matters of Yahuwah, to comprehend these 22 letters, to see the correlation between what is built in nature, which was intentionally, intelligently designed, built, sustained, kana, shamayim, ve'eretz, maker and possessor, sustainer of heaven and earth, no other Elohim, the one and only. Forget the devil, it's a distraction. What voice? And it better be on key. All 22 letters have a voice, and all 20, not just 4, but all 22 are echad. So as we study these things and realize who is Yahweh Zavot, other people who think to know him, may be right, may be wrong. I'm not trying to evaluate them. It's my burden. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, with all your heart and all your soul, as we mentioned last week. Two sides of this, gosh, neither Jew nor Christian, neither Protestant nor Catholic nor Orthodox, neither Muslim nor Buddhist nor Hindu nor whatever other flavor or variety of Elohim Achrim or other philosophy or other perspective. It's like it's got to be in these letters. We're going to take a break, get to part 2, talking about Shavuot, the counting of 50.